Meeting of the White Bear Lake Conservation District Board to order. We have a quorum. Wow, full board. Thank you all, everyone, for being here. We're down to item 3 on the agenda, which is approval of agenda. Does anybody have any modifications to the agenda that they'd like to offer? Mike?
Yes, I would like to add the Steve McComas report under new business.
Further.
Oh.
I think it's under.
Yep, we're just trying to move it up the agenda, Kim.
Yep.
Okay, so is that a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it. Motion and second to move that. That's kind of dumb. Probably don't need a motion for that, hey? Okay, we're going to just back up. And anybody else have any other changes they'd like to offer? Okay, I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as modified. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay. So approval of last month's minutes. Does anybody have any adjustments to the minutes from last month's meeting? Okay. All right. Well, I'll make a motion. We approve last month's minutes. We have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Public comments. So we reserve 15 minutes in the meeting to allow people to come up and talk about things that aren't on the agenda. Anybody here for that purpose? Moving on to new business, and I don't have anything, so I think we're on to Steve. Steve, will you come up and just introduce yourself and then tear into your report?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Steve McComas. I am an aquatic scientist, and I work for Blue Water Science, and I have been delineating and assessing the aquatic plants in White Bear Lake for a number of years. And tonight is going to bring along a report and describe kind of what we found, and it's mostly, I think, pretty good news. So there might be a copy of the report there, but I did bring along a handout, just a one-page handout. And this is just the kind of some talking points. That way we might not have to, you can refer to the report for the big pictures. I'm hoping that
Thank you.
rather than going through the full report, we just kind of go over this handout. And you can also refer, you can see in the report there's some bigger, larger maps and things, and that might be handy too. But this, I think, will speed things up a little bit. So in this summer, what we usually do is we start out fairly early to midsummer, and this year it was June 13th. We go around the lake and we do this meander boat survey. And they call it a meander pattern, a meander survey. And we're dropping rakes and we're looking at visual observations and looking for Eurasian water milfoil or its hybrids. And we're also looking at native plants, and we're looking for abundance or excessive growth that we would circle up. So we have a GPS in our hand, and as we go along, we take a rake sample, and we look at it, and if it has a lot of Eurasian milfoil, we give it a point, and we go back, and then we connect all the points up. If there are a number of points that are together in a kind of a clump, we'll circle that up, and then that area would be treated with herbicides. Sometimes if we just see an isolated patch of milfoil or a couple little stems coming up, but it's relatively light growth, we'll let that go. So we don't treat all the milfoil. What we try to do is treat the non-native invasive species of milfoil where it can be a potential problem for recreation and also navigation. And when we did that, we came up this year. I'm sorry, the pictures are a little bit small, but they're also in the full report. But when we went around and did that, and also I should mention that And we've had Mike Pronto out with us. He is an expert at knowing where some of those patches are, and sometimes I might miss them. Mike goes, hey, better go off here to the left a little bit. Sure enough, there's a patch. And so between what Mike knows and his personal knowledge of the lake and what we can do with our electronics, I think we usually have a pretty good success at getting most of the abundant or nuisance Eurasian water milfoil growth. This year, when we circled up all our areas, we ended up with about 15 areas that had a high enough milfoil growth to treat, and that totaled about 56 acres of Eurasian milfoil. So the map kind of shows you the general areas, and the dots are pretty small, but the red dots are where there was, that's the heavy abundant growth. And when you have 2 or 3 red dots in an area, along with some yellows, which would be kind of a moderate growth, that's when we circle them up. Some years we've had more than 56 acres, and some years we've had less. So that's what these maps on this first page show. We have our what we call delineation, then there's a treatment, and so 56 acres was treated, and then we come back and we do what's called an assessment. We have the electronically on our sonar, we can go right to those treated areas and we check within those treated areas to see how good was the milfoil control, did they get it, and did we get our money's worth, and then also did we miss any milfoil? So in between those treatment areas, we'll look to see if there's any more milfoil that might have surprised us. Well, in 2019, on August 7th, which was our assessment, there was, for the most part, very good control. We didn't have hardly any Eurasian milfoil within 2 or 3 feet of the surface. And that was kind of the goal for both sailing and then just for general boating and recreational use. So there were 2 types of herbicides used this year, and that's what this picture on the lower left shows. If you look at that blue line right through the middle of the lake, on the left side or on the that'd be the west side, there was a herbicide called Depth Charge, and that's a combination of a 2,4-D along with another systemic herbicide. It's a kind of a cocktail herbicide, and then on the other side, kind of the northwest side or to the right, just a 2,4-D herbicide was used. So we looked at, kind of doing a natural experiment out here to see if one was better than another. And it turns out that 2,4-D got just as good a control as compared to that other herbicide called Depth Charge. So that gives us some information for going forward. 2,4-D, which is probably a little bit cheaper. I'm not sure, Mike, is that right, or are they about the same? But it looks like 2,4-D also gives us really good control. And for that matter, so did that other herbicide called Depth Charge. The bottom graph there on the lower right, that shows historical herbicide use in terms of acres. And you can see we've had we treated heavy one year. It really seems to knock it down for almost the next year, but we don't get long-term control. But we do get maybe some carryover to the next year. And that's been kind of our pattern. If you look at the last 10 years or so, we go high and we go low, we're up and then we're down. This last year, we were down a little bit in terms of acres treated compared to 2018. On the other side, what I'm showing is that there was a suggestion a couple years ago. Somebody said on the board, are is this milfoil always a problem? And it turns out that's a good question. So what we did is we've taken the last 10 years of our treatment areas and just layered them on top of each other to take a look to see, is there a pattern showing up in the lake? And that's what this map in the upper left is. We're just calling it, EWM, Eurasian water milfoil treatments from 2012 to 2019. We put them all on top. We go over to the next map, which is there on the upper right, the hotspot map. What we did is if there was an area that was treated for 3 or 4 years, or the last 6 or 7, we circled that up. And so that heavy black line there is what we would be calling hotspots. That seems to be an area or areas that will produce kind of a heavy or abundant milfoil growth, kind of clues us in. So there are some areas of the lake that do seem to produce milfoil more often than not, heavy growth in some of these specific areas. It kind of helps us zero in too when we're doing our delineation. So those hot spots represent about 50 or 60 acres, and some years there's going to be a little bit more than that, and some years it's going to be a bit less, and also some years there'll be some heavy growth that comes up that's not necessarily in that hot spot area, but is not a perennial problem. So we're also on the lookout for that as well. And then after that, these last few graphs here on the page, or the last few slides, are one, we've been tracking lake levels going back with data to 1924. That graph there represents 14,000 lake level points over almost 100 years worth. You can see there's been some ups and downs, and as of 2019, we're back up. The levels have come back up. If we look over to that slide to the middle right-hand side, I've had the opportunity to work on White Bear Lake for almost 20 years. And in 1999, I was standing at the public access, Ramsey County Public Access, looking off to my right as I look at the lake toward the swimming beach, and took a picture there. And I've been taking a picture there every year since then. So I have about 20 years of that. It's pretty much the same, but all of a sudden 2012, when it's one of our lowest lake level years, you can see that water was 4 or 5 feet lower. You can see that it had quite an effect. Now in 2019, that same area, that same view, water is pretty much back. And that's kind of what the graph right to the left shows as well. In the lower left, we've done a little bit of water quality graphing. And this is Secchi Disk. That's the clarity measurements going from 1969 through 2018. I didn't find 2019. I'll have that in there, either update this report or have it for next year. But the clarity, and here, the farther down the red lines go, the clearer the water is. And when the lake was at some of the lower levels, because we had such abundant plant growth, we had more plant growth than usual, water was clearer. And that's shown there with the Secchi Disk that was probably all-time high. Since water levels are coming back, there is more water, because of more water, there's more runoff coming in, a little bit less transparency. We still have excellent transparency in White Bear, just not as good as it was maybe when it was at the all-time low. So water clarity has an impact on aquatic plant growth too. It will filter or kind of block the sunlight to a degree, and that also will keep the abundance of plants down to a degree. Not necessarily eliminating plants, but sometimes keeping them from hitting the surface or having this really robust growth. And then I'm just finishing it. If I would have had a PowerPoint and slides, I just would have ended it with this hotspot map, again, showing that we will still be checking these hotspots. And right now, the lake seems to be managed for Eurasian water milfoil to allow us for recreation and for navigation. I should add one little side note. At the 3 public accesses, we also did some additional intensive surveys to look for another invasive species, and that's the starry stonewort. Typically, starry stonewort shows up first at public accesses. It's in 14 lakes right now, and almost all of them, it's come into the public access, and that's where it's first observed. So we targeted the VFW access, Mataska, and Ramsey County access. We sampled about 50 to 100 additional sites and did not find any starry stonewort. So that might be something we can do right in conjunction with this delineation as time goes forward as well. Medicine Lake has starry stonewort right now. It's the only lake in the metro area, and we're hoping that won't necessarily be a new source for transfer to other lakes, but something to keep an eye on. I am working on lakes with starry stonewort, and one of those is Lake Coronis. That's about a 3,000 acre lake. It has taken over about 700 acres, so it's something that we would prefer not to have in to White Bear, but there is some good news there too. I'm also working on 4 other lakes where when it is found, the starry stonewort is found very early at the public access, we've been pretty aggressive. We've been either treating it with a copper sulfate, because it's an algae, so you use copper sulfate. We've been treating it with copper sulfate, or we've been going in even hand pulling. And then in one lake, we're hand pulling and using copper sulfate. So far, those 4 lakes that I've been kind of working with, it has been contained at the public access for going on 4 years. So it looks like with some aggressive treatments, and we've been treating 3 or 4 times a year, this copper sulfate, we've been keeping it contained at the public access. So we'll see how that goes as time goes on. We know Eurasian milfoil, when it first came into White Bear in 1988, we tried to contain it and keep it controlled, maybe just one where it first showed up. It's a little bit different animal, Eurasian milfoil. It spreads from fragments, a whole variety of things, and we were pretty aggressive. Some of those early treatments involved up to about 40, 50 acres, but we found after 6 or 7 years it had pretty much gone around the lake. Then Eurasian milfoil was low level, was present in the lake, but very light for about another 10, 12 years. Last 5 or 6 years, it's come back. So these aquatic plants, a little bit unpredictable, but we're tracking them. I've had great help from not only from Mike, but Jay Rendell, and others have been out in the boat off and on over the years. There's always room in the boat if anybody else is interested as well in the future. So thanks, and if there's time for any questions, take some questions.
Okay, Scott?
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about hybrid milfoil?
Yeah.
There was the Rice Creek Watershed District sent out an email at the end of July saying, oh, hybrid's hard to treat, and treating it might actually make it worse. I guess the question is, do we have any of that in White Bear? And what's all this about special treatment?
That's a great question. Hybrids are on the scene, and a hybrid milfoil is a cross between the native northern milfoil and the pure Eurasian milfoil. They'll cross, and then you'll get a hybrid milfoil. What happens, though, is that then the hybrid can also back cross with other milfoils, another native or Eurasian, and pretty soon you have a whole variety of different types of genotypes of this hybrid. Now what they're finding is that a couple of these genotypes are a little bit resistant to herbicides compared to other genotypes, other types of crosses of the hybrid. The hybrid by itself, for the most part, most of the hybrids are controlled and are controllable with 2,4-D or others. There seems to be 1 or 2 genotypes, and again, that's a hybrid, that's a northern milfoil, Eurasian milfoil, kind of a mix. There's some genotypes out there that seem to be a little bit resistant to a 2,4-D, in fact, to other herbicides as well. Different genotypes might show different resistance to different herbicides. But right now, our 2,4-D is working on all the genotypes we have in White Bear Lake. It's something to keep an eye on, though. And Bald Eagle has a variety of genotypes, a variety of hybrids, and most lakes we find are going to end up producing those hybrids in the long run. Pretty soon, the pure Eurasian is going to be fairly rare. It'll be crossing and be hybridized with northern. So that's the hybrid milfoil, but it has the characteristics of an invasive species and can produce that heavy growth.
Okay, well, so one question, the graph in the lower right, so, we're doing this up and down. Should we anticipate that we'll have more acres to treat next year since we've been down for a bit, or can't really draw that conclusion?
You know what? I think if you look at the long-term trend of the ups and downs, we're on kind of a downward slope now. With lake levels being back up, we're not getting quite the robust of the heavy growth of milfoil. I would think that we're going to stay on that line. I don't see it increasing. It might vary a little bit within that mean, but it looks like the long-term trend is heading back down. It'd be interesting if we get back to back in the early 2000s when we were down just to minimal. And a lot of those acres there we've gone in and gotten records for homeowners just treating their nearshore areas. I don't think the Conservation District was actually having to treat the open water milfoil back for a number of years.
Okay. And then, should we be monitoring any chemical species in the lake? And I'm thinking about chlorides or anything else. And can you just talk about that for a bit?
Yes, fortunately, Ramsey County is collecting those data. And so we have the chlorides, and we have the nutrients, and we have the chlorophyll, which is a surrogate for algae. So we have the main nutrient, the algae, and the clarity, along with the chlorides being monitored, and there's nitrogen as well. And that, though, is usually with the watershed district. I've been trying to put in the clarity records, but we actually have a pretty good record of the other species. Chloride levels, for example, have been increasing in White Bear, but they're increasing in just about all the lakes in the metro area. And I guess the good news is that the chloride levels are still relatively low in White Bear. Although they're increasing, they're still at low levels compared to a lot of other lakes, and well below any potential impaired status. But you'll see as winter goes on here, there'll be a lot of information in the news on using salt and trying to reduce salt use, because almost all the lakes are increasing with that chloride level. At some point, chlorides can be a little bit of a problem.
Yep. And is there anything that can be done with chloride once it's present in the water?
Boy, that's a good question, too. Chlorides are biologically inert. We hardly anything biological takes them up. There's hardly anything that they absorb to, like phosphates, they'll attach to clay surfaces and things like that and be taken out of the system. Chlorides do not do that. So what happens is they have to be diluted for the most part. And rainwater coming in and things like that, long term you can dilute the chloride levels, and some of them will even go out through the groundwater and things. But we don't really have a way to reduce them in the lake except to reduce the inputs, and then long term they'll be diluted with like rainwater and things like that.
Okay, and then my last question, Phragmites, can you talk about that and what we saw this year?
Mike Pronto has probably a better handle on that than I do. But Phragmites is something to watch and something to control, because if we're not careful, we know that cattails sometimes can really take over a system. Phragmites might be as bad, if not worse, in terms of its potential to expand if the conditions are suitable. And we're just not sure what those conditions are yet, so it's good to stay on top of it. And Mike has the latest information on that.
All right, and Mike talked about that last meeting quite a bit. Okay, any other questions?
Yeah. One more. Is the improvement in clarity, is there any impact of zebra mussels that contribute to this?
Yes, there will be some, as the clarity increase in that big jump where we had an all-time high, probably was a combination of low lake levels combined with some of the filtering impacts of zebra mussels. But what we're finding out, in Lake Minnetonka has been kind of our sounding board. Lake Minnetonka has about 25 bays. Some of them are very fertile, are very eutrophic. Some are very infertile, almost what they call oligotrophic. So we've been watching the dynamics of zebra mussels in these various types of water quality situations. In the infertile bays, where you don't have a lot of blue-green algae, the zebra mussels are able to filter that algae that's there because it's all single-celled. It's perfect for their growing. It's optimal. And the zebra mussels have exploded. Clarity has increased dramatically, but they have filtered out so much of the algae that they actually are starting to die back. They're starving themselves. So the population is not sustained, and there's been a big die back. Now, in White Bear, I'm looking at the water clarity, and I can compare that to the moderately fertile bays in Lake Minnetonka. 6 to 8 years is when the zebra mussels will peak, and then they'll start dying back. And at 6 to 8 years, that's when the water quality or clarity is probably going to peak as well. And then as those zebra mussels die back, filtering of the algae decreases. Algae come back, and then the clarity will decrease a bit, but as the algae come up, the zebra mussels will grow to kind of keep the algae under control. The algae dies back or is filtered out. The zebra mussels go down, algae comes back. So we'll be in this kind of a pattern, this boom, not a boom and bust, but a typical predator-prey pattern. So water clarity probably will not sustain at those levels, those peak levels, but it will still be good. And that's going to be okay. And the zebra mussels will be kind of coming and going as well. They'll be, if they're not dying back already, they will be. You'll probably see some empty shells here and there, and some zebra mussels starving themselves basically for a lack of food, which is not all bad. So I say that zebra mussels are not good for a lake. They're not bad for a lake, but they'll change a lake, and that's kind of what we're saying in White Bear.
Anything else for Steve? Okay, thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
Steve.
you.
So that takes care of new business. We're on to item 7 on the agenda, unfinished business. And Scott, I'll just turn it over to you for this amendment to ordinance number 5.
What you've got here on your tables is two things. One is this rather dense thing that I wrote on the work I've been doing. And then we have, thanks to Alan, who has translated this into 3 separate ordinances that we can vote on. Okay, that's ordinance 2019-1, 2, and 3 are in separate sheets. And I'll just give a little bit of background here of what we're trying to do. This came up earlier in the summer, I think originally when someone came asking about swimming buoys. And that opened up a bunch of discussion about buoys in general and what buoys should look like, and mooring buoys that weren't properly constituted so that they were causing navigational problems. So I went and studied first what our ordinances say about buoys, which is basically that there's no mention of swimming buoys, but mooring buoys, we do regulate them if they're outside the ADUA. So that'd be a couple hundred feet out, then we would issue a permit. Is what, the way it's laid out in there. But as to the issue of what constitutes a proper mooring buoy, all our regulations say is that, well, they can't be a navigational hazard and you need a permit if they're outside the ADUA. So in additional research, I found out that there are state administrative rules on buoys that specify exactly what a mooring buoy has to look like. It has to be a certain size, shape, color with certain markings. And most interestingly, the state requires that to put any buoy anywhere in a state lake, you need a permit from the sheriff's department. Now, of course, in our case, we have 2 counties. So, and I was able to find the case of Ramsey County. There are actually additional, more stringent requirements on mooring buoys. So, given all this, our discussion led to, well, let's tighten up our ordinances a little bit to mention this. So I started digging into that. I found 2 places where the ordinances could be slightly modified. One is where we talk about what constitutes a proper mooring buoy, and another part of the ordinances that explain how what circumstances you need a permit from us. So there's 2 parts. So I drafted essentially an additional sentence to each of those parts. And then I found a further complication. And in the past, we created Ordinance 12. And all that Ordinance 12 contains is 2 paragraphs from Ordinance 5 that it replaces, which is kind of an awkward way of doing it, because what's actually in Ordinance 5 is wrong because it's been changed by 12. And one of these paragraphs is one I wanted to modify. So it became, well, what do I do? Create a new Ordinance 22 that modifies 16, or, that modifies 12, that modifies 5, which seems like kind of a silly way to do it. So what I'm also proposing here is that we modify 5 directly, okay? So the 5 will be correct, and then what we're doing now is having sort of a history, which I describe in this longer write-up. So that would say what we did when. So what you'll see here in the 3 ordinances that Alan drafted. Ordinance number 1 updates 5, and it's not highlighted here, but in the first paragraph of the proposed ordinance, I added a sentence that says mooring buoys must meet additional standards for size, color, and marking as specified by State Administrative Rule 6110.1500, which also requires that no buoy may be placed in state waters without first obtaining a permit from the sheriff of the county. Okay, so this is in addition to our rules up above there. Where you can't have a potential safety hazard, et cetera. And the second paragraph is the other one from Ordinance 12 that I'm now putting back into 5, okay? And then the next page here, this ordinance number 2019.02. And in this case, it is highlighted in italics. This is where we say that we have to require a permit to put a mooring buoy outside the ADUA. And the sentence I added there was State of Minnesota Administrative Rule 6110.1500 requires that no buoy may be placed in state waters without first obtaining a permit from the sheriff of the county. Any license application to the board for a buoy must include a copy of the approved sheriff's permit. And that permit form, I would also then say that at the bottom, because you can definitely put attachments on these permits. So I wanted to clarify that you needed to do that. So in the 1 or 2 buoy permits that we issue every year, we would essentially be saying, okay, you've got to talk to the sheriff before you come and ask the board to approve one outside an ADUA. And then, okay, the third one, ordinance number 2019-03, basically removes ordinance 12 altogether because it's no longer needed. All of its text is now back in ordinance 5 where it should have been to begin with. So we've got 3 ordinances to discuss. I guess first, any questions before we make a motion?
So one question, this subpart 1B, the second paragraph that came out of 12 back into 5, were there any modifications made to that one?
No.
All right. Any other questions for Scott?
I just want to, say thank you for all the work you've done in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty minor issue, but to do it right took some work on my part and on Alan's part, so.
And Alan, do you have anything to add to any of this?
I guess just briefly, nice to get the background, which is why that handout went out, and of course, the way the district operates. To change the laws, we have to pass laws, so it can't just be a simple resolution sort of amending and changing and whatnot. So we're doing this by 3 separate ordinances to do essentially what Scott just said. So this is also coming on the heels of actually meeting with sheriff's deputies, understanding what they think our role is. I think the executive committee met in, July? I want to say, somewhere in that time frame, just to get a sense of how the sheriff's deputy views buoys on at least the Ramsey side of the lake. And I think we actually posted their application on the website, didn't we? At some point?
Yeah, and actually Washington County has the permit, but they don't have any additional
Available.
rules like Ramsey County has.
Right. So we're trying to make it easier, essentially, instead of harder for people to get those, because I think there's sort of a learning curve as to what you need to do relative to buoys. So we largely don't deal with them at all, but now we're actually saying if you're going to put them in your swim area, do this, comply with that state rule, so we're not duplicating the effort that the state's already put out. So I would recommend doing it, and as Scott has already said, if it's outside your ADUA, we already require a permit. We're not very proactive in that, so largely reactive. But as this says, you also need, because they have concurrent jurisdiction, basically, you also need a permit from the sheriff. And so from what we've been told, they number them and they keep track of them, mostly so that if something happens, they've got an identifying placard, if you will, so that the responsible party can be called depending on what the situation is. So that's why they regulate them in the first place, is just in case there's an incident. So anyway, I would recommend the passage, and yeah, it was great to work with Scott and, get it done. So it just made sense to repeal Ordinance 12, just because it, once you've integrated the language into the other existing Ordinance 5, then there's no point in keeping it on the books.
Right. Can we do this with one resolute or with
I would
one
just pass
motion?
these as 3 separate votes. The way these things work, you should pass first reading of these ordinances, and then the next meeting, unless you want to waive it, which in this case I wouldn't see why we wouldn't, we can waive second reading and just pass them through. We'll have to publish these in the local paper before they go live, and that's just sort of the process with passing law.
So, and sorry to be ignorant, so we pass all these, or we vote on all these once, assuming they pass. Then we could immediately waive the need for a second.
You could?
And however, I'm not inclined to do that since it's not an urgent matter and we can take this up in January.
Yep, and in fact, if you want to do it that way and slow it down, you can also have at your next meeting a public hearing if anyone wants to come and talk about buoys.
Sure.
Okay. I think I've talked enough about buoys, but yeah.
Case, people might want to come in and say, hey, thanks for doing that. We've had problems, and so now you're doing something about it. So it's a chance for people to come in, and if we miss something, there might be people out there watching at home that are smarter about buoys than we are. Mm-hmm. Happens.
Can we do all 3 in one motion?
I would not. I'd just say pass ordinance 1 and 2 and 3. That's just my preference. The record's very clear that way.
Okay.
Then I make a motion to approve ordinance number 2019-01.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 2019-01. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
And I make a motion to approve ordinance number 2019-02.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve ordinance number 2019-02. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes.
And I make a motion to approve ordinance 2019-03.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve ordinance number 2019-03. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, and Kim, will you make sure to have this on our January agenda for a second reading?
And public hearing?
Do I have to have it in the paper prior to the second reading, or I'll wait till after?
When would we publish it in the paper?
Publish it,
We publish it once it's passed.
Okay.
so I have to wait till after the second.
Yep. And do you want to do a public hearing and notice that for this, or no?
And would you advise that, Alan?
It's up to you if you think you're going to get a whole lot of comment.
Yeah, let's plan for that.
Okay.
To have a public hearing at the January meeting.
Yep. And we'll have to put out notice of that, too.
Yep, and can you work with
I'll help
Kim?
with Kim,
Thank
yep.
you. Okay, any other, well, I think we're done with that. Thank you, Scott.
Brian, do we need to put something out next spring notifying residents on the lake and other people what those buoys need to look like?
So I
An
think,
educational piece of some sort?
will you raise that next spring, Susie? Thank you. Okay, so we're on to item 8, reports, action items. First one is executive committee. The executive committee didn't meet, so there's no report there. Lake Quality Committee, Mike?
The lake level today is 925, 0.00. It's right on the button, and it stayed at 925 all summer. It's amazing. The water temperature is 36 degrees, and it was 36 degrees at this time last year also. So lake is very close to freezing. It froze early last year. Well, new time early, November 28th last year it froze and stayed frozen. There's been parts of it freezing now, but it hasn't stayed frozen at all. So that's the water temperature. The Phragmites treatment, the assessment of that treatment was taken by Lake Management, and they said it was very, very successful. Looking forward to next year, there could be a small amount of regrowth in some of the one dense place that they had it. Typically, they see very little of that happening. They're very pleased with it and think that they can get total control. The DNR recommends that you have a 2 to 3 year program, though, to try to eradicate it. So we will follow with that. And the helping us to decide that we would like to follow with that is that early on Ramsey County had kind of alerted us that we had Phragmites and that there was other people monitoring it, had seen it first and alerted. And it finally got to us, and Ramsey County didn't have anything budgeted for it. And so we just took the stand. I asked the board, we took the stand that we were just going to go do it. We're going to take care of our lake. And we had funds, fortunately, to do it. And Ramsey County approached me a month ago, almost, and said, have you done your treatment? And I said, yeah, we did. Treatment is just happening right now, and we're waiting for the assessments. He says, well, I have some extra budget money for it, and tell me what your bill is. Well, the Phragmites treatment, we didn't know what it was going to be. It came in a lot cheaper than we thought. It came in at $986.85. So Ramsey County said, we'll pay for it. So they paid the whole bill, and they're budgeting money for next year. So not only did we get a good report, a good treatment, and hopefully a chance to control it, it was paid for. So, any questions? That's
Okay,
it for
no
me.
questions for Mike? Thank you, Mike.
And Kim, please, I emailed him back, Justin, I emailed him back, but maybe you could send him a nice thank you type of thing. Okay. And did you send out I talked to Lake Management today, and they didn't have any bills or anything to pay, so I told them to bill Ramsey County directly.
Yeah, I sent it to Justin, and then he contacted Lake Management and asked them to just resend the bill to him directly with their name on it. So
Okay, I guess it's all happening at the same time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So the next item on the agenda, Lake Utilization Committee, Mark?
Chair Board, we had a pretty big agenda today. First one on the agenda was Forest Heights. That's in Matamidi. No change from last year. LUC moved to approve, and I so move.
Okay, and I'm just trying to find Forest Heights. Okay, got it. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the Forest Heights application. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
Okay, the next two were Scott Bonin and Derek, I think it's Skier. That's right off of 190, right at about the Delwood border and White Bear Lake. But there's two docks there. They both have easement holders. They both have 6 boats. We ran into a little conundrum, and we just decided we'd like some further information at the LUC committee, so we pushed it on to another month. The next one is Manitou Island Association. That is the swim beach on Manitou Island over that area they call Snapping Turtle Bay. We voted unanimously not to approve this year. And for the reason that this is all private property, it's not public. And blocking off navigable waters for public access, for private use, we didn't see it was a very good road to go down. So we voted unanimously no. And I move to a vote. If there's any discussion, questions.
Okay, so did you make a motion to, so I guess they're,
Yeah, I'm not used to doing this like this, but we voted no at the LUC, but now it still comes to the board, gets their vote. We don't have a vote on this at the board level. We just don't recommend it.
Well, this is really for buoys, right?
Well, this is for the swim ropes.
Yeah, which we don't have any ordinances on at all. So I mean, I agree we don't approve it, but I don't.
No, but you can't block navigable water for private use, and this is private use. Now, Bel Air's different. They've got a lifeguard, they've got bathrooms, they've got parking. Same with Ramsey Beach, same with Matamidi Beach, Bel Air. They're all, the ones that have ropes are public. So you can block that off for the public. But if you have a private island where nobody has access to even the properties or access to the lake from the road, then you're talking about private property owners cordoning off the lake for themselves.
okay. So, Alan, sorry to, again, be ignorant, but would, do we act on this, or by not acting on it, it's not approved?
Well, by not acting on it, you're not passing it, so
Right.
it wouldn't be a permit.
Okay.
Table it if you want.
Yep, we'll table it.
All right, we're going to table this. Okay. Make sure I got my notes. Okay, next one, City of Birchwood Village. Packet came in. There are a few questions about it, but everything looks to be renewal identical to last year. And this is for the docks with boats on them. So we voted, the LUC voted to approve, and I so move.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve the City of Birchwood Village application. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes.
Second for Birchwood Village is they want to put 2 buoys, not rope buoys, but just 2 buoys for their swim area at the end of K Beach. So K Beach is about 50 feet wide. They have a dock out there that goes 180 feet, but what they didn't do is give us a drawing exactly where they wanted to put the buoys. So, and there was a concerned homeowner next door to K Beach that wanted to see where they were going to put them too. So we decided to table this and get a better drawing from the township or the city. Next one is White Bear Township. And they are just putting 2 buoys out in front of one of their public access areas. So we move to approve, and I so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the White Bear Township application. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes.
The next one, Matamidi Wildwood Beach condominiums. Renewal, no change from last year. The LUC voted unanimously to approve, and I so move.
Second.
Motion and a second. To approve the Wildwood Beach Club application. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
Next one is McCarty Estates, Matamidi, right off the end of Locust. They have 75 feet. They put in new docks last year. There was a little concern on that by one of the neighbors. They seem to have worked it out together. They're just going to push their dock over about 10 feet from that particular neighbor. And we approved, and I so move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the McCartney Estates application. Is there any discussion?
You said docks. Is there more than one on that area?
I'm sorry, dock.
Okay,
One dock, 6 boats.
got it.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes.
And the last one on the agenda is the Hickory Street dock. Renewal identical to last year, no complaints, no issues. The LUC voted to approve, and I so move.
We have a motion and a second to approve the Hickory Street Dock Association application. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes.
That's it for me.
Any questions for Mark?
There's another listing of Roxanne Hodgson.
That one was a property owner. She wanted to be on the agenda, and we are going to speak with her attorney and have a meeting with her at her beachfront to go over placement of docks in the area. It's right next to McCartney Estates, too. So we had them all here at once, mostly all but one neighbor. But now we're going to extend that, and we're going to go down and meet them at their beach site to go over it further. Thanks.
Okay, any further questions for Mark? Okay, thank you, Mark. So we're on to the Lake Education Committee. Scott?
I have no report.
All right, thank you. And so we're on to Treasurer's Report. Diane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have the Treasurer's Report for November 2019. Included in this report is payment to Blue Water Science for their survey. So that's paid up. So I'd like to make a motion to accept checks 4608 through 4614.
Okay, motion and a second to approve these checks. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes.
Thank you. Because we don't meet in December, we always put together an estimated treasurer's report and just vote on it so that we can pay bills in December that come in, and then in January you'll get a detailed December 2019 treasurer's report. So I would just like to make a motion to accept the December 2019 estimated treasurer's report to be able to pay bills in December.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the estimated report for December. Is there any discussion? Mike?
There's $50 for the video, but we don't have a meeting in December?
They're a month behind.
Oh, all
So
right, good.
that would be for November,
I didn't.
for this one. So we won't have one in December.
Jan-
Or January, yeah.
Okay, any additional discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That passes.
Thank you.
An additional item, approval of treasurer's report as of 11/19/19.
That's, we did with these checks.
Okay, and then, so that's just a duplicate. Okay, got it. Okay, any questions for Diane? Okay, so we're on to the board council report. Alan?
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. Obviously got a little bit of housekeeping out of the way. Thought I'd let you know that I have reached out again to Washington County and still trying to hook back up with them. They're putting things to bed at the end of the season, obviously, so that was a little difficult. Have been in touch with the state. We're still sort of in a holding pattern with respect to Commercial Bay and what's going to happen there. So I maintain contact with DNR to kind of bring you guys up to speed whenever I can. And so, stay tuned, I guess. We've still got, we have an application open in the Bay, I believe, for public comment and review right now, and so that period is just about done. Did get an opportunity to pick up, of all things, a drone. I thought I'd bring that to you guys and see if there's any interest in the board owning such a thing for its own sort of purposes in the summertime. And I'll kind of throw that out for you guys to talk about to see if you wanted to do that. So I guess with that, I would stand for questions and hopefully have a bit more from Washington County. But I'd be interested to hear what everyone thinks about kind of doing a little enforcement of our own. We used to do it on occasion with some folks that actually have these things who were nice enough to just kind of let us use them. But that was kind of a catch as catch can sort of a basis. And I think there might be some merit to being able to do that instead of people volunteering to go out on boat rides and sort of count heads. So. With that, I'd turn it over for any sort of discussion and see if there's an interest there in pursuing that.
Well, I think personally, I would like to also investigate then the, just subbing that service out to somebody, paying somebody who has a drone, knows how to fly the drone, to do that service for us, as opposed to us owning the piece of equipment, having to maintain it to use 2 or 3 times a summer. I guess I'd just throw that into the discussion. And probably not something we have to take action on tonight.
Nope. Just thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, and thank you for raising that point, by the way.
Challenges with the Commercial Bay has been, where's Waldo? It's counting boats and it's pretty jammed in there, and so it's hard to tell who's being honest and who's not, just from the boater's eye view, if you will. And so the only really effective way to do that is to get a snapshot kind of from above and just kind of catch what's going on in time, real time, and looking down and going 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's why it kind of became important this summer, because everyone's scrambling for, he's got this, she's got that, and they shouldn't have this, that, and the other thing. And it's been very hard to determine who's essentially telling the truth. So as the people that are regulating primarily, it would be nice if we at least knew what the actual real number was. So,
have we ever hired a drone operator before?
Well, again, we've actually been benefited by having people that people know to do that on occasion for us. There's a Birchwood resident that I know that's done it for us, for example. But you can't rely on, favors from folks all the time. So I can certainly look into that and figure out a decent operator that would be willing to do it sort of a la carte if you want.
I think that's becoming more and more common for these drone operators to offer that service for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, and the challenge with that is, of course, the FAA. And so because they're technically supposed to be regulated flight, if you will, a lot of the people that kind of do it as an aw shucks, I'll do it as a favor, are the ones that are hobbyists. And so you're right, there are people that are doing it. Now it's more money because, like I said, they have to log their flights, they have to be certified, they have to be operators, under the law. So it might cost a little bit, but for the few times a year that we might want to do it, just to get accurate counts to see if everyone's, playing nice, it might be a good idea, just for the coming year.
Okay. Is there any additional discussion on this? Otherwise, I think it's a great idea, and we should have it on a future agenda.
Sure. Or executive or something like that.
That's right.
I just thought I'd bring it up because, got an offer on a pretty decent unit for a pretty good price. So.
I think it's a great idea, Alan, and I think that'll keep people a little more honest, and now we'll have the proof behind the ones that aren't being honest. And I also agree with Brian that we probably don't want to deal with the equipment, and we should hire it out. If we can afford to hire it out, we should hire it out to somebody that legally can do it for us.
So my day job is in MnDOT's Office of Aeronautics, so I have some connections with drones, and I can help make sure that we are legal with that, because there are also, if you're operating a drone commercially, there are state commercial operators license that are required too. So if we go down that road, I can help keep us legal with that. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Any additional comments on that or any questions for Alan?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Okay, we're on to item 9 on the agenda, announcements. Kim? Okay, nothing from Kim. So we're on to item 10, a lot of people's favorite part of the agenda. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you, we're adjourned, and thank you, everyone, for